Ever since the release of Stranger Things on July 15th of 2016, there have been 4 seasons and a half, with Volume 2 and 3 of Season 5 coming out in a couple of weeks. This show has always been a fan favorite because of the 80s setting, the lovable characters, the unique plot points, and I could just keep going on and on. Is there a bad season of Stranger Things? Well, I wouldn't say that any season could be considered bad. It is true that seasons 2 and 3 may be less liked by the community for many reasons, but I wouldn't necessarily call them bad. These 2 seasons have many good moments to help contribute towards the unique concept of Stranger Things. Season 4 was also a pretty good season. I would say it's the second best in the entire show. Season 4 was filled with some amazing episodes, such as Dear Billy and the Massacre at Hawkins Lab, but I still like Season 1 more just because of how simple yet entertaining it was. Why do I still consider Season 1 the best of the entire show? Well, first, let's start off with the characters. Of course, when talking about characters in the season, you have to include Winona Ryder, who played Joyce Byers, and gave an Emmy-deserving performance. Part of the reason why this show is so popular today is because of Winona Ryder and how big her name has been. She basically perfected the role of a mom who is looking for her missing kid. Everyone in Hawkins thinks she's just some sort of crazy or delusional person, but her drive to find her son is what allows for this amazing performance by Winona. Everyone doubts her, but she never gives up even for a second. One thing that I wish they did in the later seasons was allow for Joyce to shine even more, just because of how good she was in Season 1. Another character that I found was pretty interesting was Jonathan Byers. Jonathan had to deal with everything regarding his mother, his abusive father, and the pain of realizing that Will might actually be gone. Jonathan wasn't this mature adult who could handle everything by himself. He was just a high schooler trying to get by in the world. In the later seasons, it also feels like his character has been reduced to a shell of his former self. The one downside of Jonathan's character was him being a creep and taking that one picture of Nancy. A character that everyone has come to love is Steve Harrington. He was initially portrayed as the typical jock, but Joe Keery's charisma was so good that the Duffer Brothers decided not to kill him. Although a lot of people called him a jerk for breaking Jonathan's camera, it's kind of justified considering what Jonathan did. There were some scenes where he did cross the line and he did say some out-of-pocket things, but he did become a remorseful person who wanted to correct his mistakes. It seems like he was heavily influenced by his friends and he became a better person instantly after ditching them. Towards the end of the season, he outgrew that sort of douchebag personality, and he actually wanted to help everyone. Of course, when mentioning Jonathan and Steve, I also have to talk about Nancy Wheeler. Nancy in Season 1 was also another character who had growth, while also being interesting. She went from the average girl to a character who was hunting monsters. After she realizes that her friend Barb went missing, she starts to understand the severity of what is actually happening. Nancy's arc was a pretty massive part of the story, and we saw her entire journey. Her pure determination to team up with Jonathan and try to connect the pieces of the puzzle was just amazing to watch. David Harbour as Jim Hopper was another standout performance. His life was pretty normal at first and he was living carefree. There was always one thing haunting him though, and that was the death of his daughter Sarah. After Joyce comes to asking for help, they both unravel the mystery behind Hawkins' lab and the other dimension, while also managing to save Will in the process. A lot of people first thought that Hopper would be the typical cop in a town who doesn't do anything at all, but he managed to surprise everyone and quickly became a fan favorite. Now let's get into our main cast of kids, which consists of Mike Wheeler, Eleven, Dustin Henderson, and Lucas Sinclair. You could include Will if you want, since he was there at the very beginning. Similar to many other characters who were amazing this season, I would also say that this was Mike's best arc, just because of how much of a leader he was. While trying to look for Will with the help of his friends Dustin and Lucas, he encounters this random girl whose name is Eleven. Mike and Eleven both formed this bond and they both like each other. During season 1, he was a character who had a lot of spotlight and everyone was able to believe in him. Many people may dislike Lucas because of how he treated Eleven, but he was easily the most realistic one out of the whole group. Although he should have been nicer towards Elle, he was still suspicious of this random girl who came out of nowhere and had powers. Once Lucas realized that he was wrong, he apologizes for his past mistakes. A lot of people would also say that Dustin was the most likable just because of how adorable he was, and I would have to agree. In many parts of the story, it feels like Dustin is the heart of the team, and he's basically the glue that holds them together. Eleven was the only character out of the cast to have powers, and that's what made her unique. Unraveling the story behind Eleven and how she became this powerful character was special to see, and her interactions with the other characters was always pretty nice. In terms of balancing the cast, this season basically perfected it. Every character had a role to play and we're getting to know them as time went on. Now let's move on to the plot of season 1 and why I think it stood out from the other seasons. Just from the first couple minutes alone, anyone could see that this show had a lot of potential after Will Byers was taken by a mysterious creature. When someone is first watching the show for the first time without having any previous knowledge, they don't know what to expect. And the mystery aspect behind everything was done very well. Just watching our cast of characters work together in the small town of Hawkins allowed for a nice experience. The aesthetic behind season 1 was also stunning. There was a fall type of vibe and it actually seemed like Hawkins was a pretty small area. Going back to the eeriness part, even the Demogorgon wasn't truly shown until the later half. And that also allowed for a lot of suspense. What made season 1 stand out was the simplicity, as I had already mentioned. There wasn't a lot of unnecessary side plots going on and everything is just kinda grounded. As time went on, it just feels like the later seasons weren't able to capture the charm of what made season 1 feel so unique and fresh. In season 1, many of the characters would go on their own character arc journey, and it would all connect in the end. I also would look at the horror aspect of season 1. The creators of Stranger Things designed season 1 as this sort of standalone story, with an open ending just in case it was never renewed. The amount of suspense in each episode alone created this sort of menacing vibe. Season 1 introduced the whole concept of the Upside Down and no one even knew what it was at first. The main genre elements that shaped season 1 would include science fiction, horror mystery, a coming-of-age story, and nostalgia. Although I do think season 4 was very well made, the amount of subplots was kinda unnecessary. You had the California subplot, the group in Hawkins, the group in Russia, and everything that was going on with Eleven. I've already mentioned the Demogorgon before, but I think only having one monster was fun, because we never knew where it actually was. During the later seasons, there's the Mind Flayer, Vecna, and the Demogorgons. One thing that also stood out to me was the camera grading and the lighting. Everything just felt really natural, and from what I heard, they managed to encompass the 80s vibe pretty well. The budget was nowhere near as big as the other seasons, and this actually helped the season out a lot. For some reason, a lot of sci-fi TV shows with a small budget always tend to be amazing. I don't think the Duffer Brothers expected Stranger Things to be this huge hit, and you can't really blame them. They've still managed to do a very good job with the later seasons, and I do think that season 5 has a lot of potential to become the best season if they actually land the ending. Now, going back to season 1, it did remind me of something that Steven Spielberg would have made. The Duffer Brothers have already stated how Stephen King, Steven Spielberg, and John Carpenter were the influences toward the entire show. Some elements in season 1 that were greatly inspired by Spielberg would include the Demogorgon, which would be compared to Jaws, because of the fear it created towards the entire town. You would also have the small group of kids who were going on a quest, which was similar to the Goonies, and the friendship between Eleven and Mike, which was similar to that of E.T., the extraterrestrial. The reason why Stranger Things has become so popular today is because of the magic that was in season 1, which allowed for the show to become a worldwide phenomenon. Combining the amazing acting, the mystery behind everything, the cohesive storyline, and the simple layers behind everything is what made season 1 a near perfect season of television. Thank you for watching and subscribe if you haven't.